Hey everybody, it's me, Lila, back with another one. This is August 29th of 2018. You need to learn when to shut up and to not drag other people into your shortcomings. Just now, you come back up from downstairs, morning coffee, and take out your phone. Guess what we missed, you say. I'm not really sure why you're caressing your phone screen, but whatever. Oh man, he was kind of like stroking his phone screen the way that like the diabolical like boss dude with the lap cat would like, in the pinky rings would like stroke their like it's oh man. Okay, anyway, that was yeah, it was funny. My check comes in on Friday. Do you know why? Is it because it's Labor Day weekend? I deadpan. I'm so sick of this we shit when you can't keep track of your life. It's just a weird thing too. So like because it's the government check, right? It comes on certain days of the month. But if those days end up being holidays or on a weekend, it will come early. So his check would come on Fridays, right? Obviously, if Monday was a holiday, or if the first or the third, whatever day it was a Saturday or Sunday, right? So, like, his check coming already on a Friday was not necessarily an irregular occurrence, right? Or coming a few days early. So, it's not even really anything to get super wound up about, right? But it almost felt like a test, right? Like he's testing whether or not I know Monday's a holiday. Um, but like not sure why that would be important. Because like I said, that it's not like I was getting paid for this or anything. Like I'm not expecting a paycheck when he gets his check or anything. So like I don't care when your check comes because like and then in the meantime he's willing to just overdraw his account to get more money. So like it's not like this was a big deal, right? So it's just like I don't know why he was making such a weird spectacle about it. Also, the fact that you don't notice that I don't particularly care. I try my hardest to live my life more or less outside of your sphere, but it's hard when I don't have a job. Since you are in control of the phone right now, though, I'm worried that you just ignore calls when someone might be people calling to offer me a job. I know that sounds silly as fuck, but it really does concern me ever since you blatantly admitted just a few weeks ago that maybe Macy's had called and you just didn't answer. Because he answers everything, and dude would actually. I mean, the call that have I talked to you about your car's extended warranty and stuff? Like he would actually argue and scream and yell and talk to those people. He answered his phone every time it rang because he just enjoys interacting with people and any opportunity to be an uppity son of a bitch. So the idea that Macy's had called and he just didn't answer doesn't make any fucking sense. Also, like if they had, they would have left a voicemail. So he would have known that whoever had called him that he missed, it was something relatively important. So, yeah, it doesn't really add up that he would think that he could get away with something like that. And then just like I said, so blatantly, like, oh, oops, maybe they did call and I just didn't answer, right? Okay. That's another thing that gets me. You seem completely oblivious to any incoming information that clearly indicates that you're a dumbass or that you're being a jerk. It's not like you have no filter, it's that you don't pick up on how your perspective of how things operate just doesn't jive with other people. There are times that I wonder if you grew up in an abusive household where your dad abused your mom, not physically, but psychologically and emotionally. So you picked up on your father's bigotry, but at the same time, your mother doted on you. So instead of being raised with a healthy dose of do this, not that, and getting smacked on the noggin when you acted up in public, you were berated harshly by your father for seemingly unimportant things, while your mother allowed you to get away with small social depravities. So it's like your his mother spoiled and rotten, and his father was overbearing, and now he's just like this weird, high-strung, angry child who thinks he's more important and better at things and therefore more important than he really is. The result is you don't know when to shut up, how to pay attention to other people, when to mind your own business, and the like, but you are aggressive and heavy handed at the dumbest, pettiest things. Seriously, do you need to pound your keyboard so hard? And why do you yank plastic bags apart? Oh God, this wasn't just a pet peeve. It was the sort of things that would make everybody around look in the grocery store. trash bags and the produce bags at the grocery store, so they make that loud whip cracking pop. Maybe that's why you're deaf. On several occasions, I have seen people giving you the what the actual fuck side eye for doing this. I pray for the day that you end up whipping one out of the holder and the roll goes flying across the store. I wonder if you would even be embarrassed, or would you go on a shouting tirade about how it should be locked down tighter when it's obvious that it's completely unnecessary to not just gently separate the bags at the perforation. There is a slit in the seam that fits perfectly over a nib in the rack to make tearing the bags super easy. Why do you yank the bags? Why do you yank the bags? Why do you yank the fucking bags? Why do you yank the fucking bags? I would pay money to be filmed screaming this at you at the store. Like one day just fucking lose it. So anyway, you know how like you can snap a towel, or whatever, like when you have the things on the roll, right? He would roll it out until he could see the perforation and then he would yank it as hard as he could to pop it off the roll. And it would make this loud snapping sound, right? And it was just so like it was embarrassing, right? That it was just like this is just dumb. Like why do you do that? But it's also, and I learned from experience with other weird little things that he did, that it's like it doesn't do any good to try to ask or say anything. Like he's not going to stop doing what he's doing. He's going to do what he's going to do. And I feel it's so crazy because like when I first saw the movie Blink Twice, and this isn't necessarily like a spoiler alert or anything, because I think for the most part people understand that the movie's about like imbalances of power and abusing power and authority, et cetera, et cetera. There's the line in there where Gina Davis's character, who's kind of like the billionaire's personal assistant or whatever, when she says like they're gonna do what they're gonna do, right? And that was this guy to a T. He's gonna do whatever he's gonna do. Now, liken that to this idea that the only other time I think I've ever really seen a character anywhere act the way that he kind of acted was Channing Tatum's character in Blink Twice. Like that movie it resonated with me, but on this almost like on this plane of just hilarious absurdity. This is what, like I said, why I call this light traffic, because there wasn't any like physical or sexual violent abuse, right? It was all just so social and like psychological, emotional kind of stuff, right? And but when it's coming from someone that I always thought of him as like Scrappy Doo. Yeah, if you ever watch those Adventures of Scooby Doo show or whatever with Scrappy Doo, and he'd be like, "Let me at him, let me at him," and it's like he's just this little pipsqueak of a pup, and it's like, but he had just this big attitude and this enormous bravado, right, and stuff, and it was almost comical sometimes to see him really trying to assert himself and just realizing that it's like he's completely out of touch, but in this oddly completely benign way, right? Like he's not outside like talking to trees about how his cousin used to grab his dick in the middle of the night. He's just like yanking the bags off at the grocery store, and then we would just be casually cruising through the store. I'd be pushing the cart, and he's walking beside me, and every time we walked by like a guy that was like his own age and whatever, he'd be like, "Oh, you better watch out, woman driver, huh, am I right?" Like all the time, right? And it was just like this kind of behavior isn't normal. And like usually the dudes would just kind of look at him like, "Why are you just randomly saying stuff to me?" And it's like, and I know they could probably see the look on my face of just like that. It's not embarrassing because it's supposed to be denigrating to me. It's embarrassing because it's just such a weird thing to do and a dumb thing to say, right? Like, oh my God. Ah. This is perhaps a great global metaphor for your state of being and why people are put off by you. It would be so easy to just keep your mind and your eye on your own shit and do things in a normal, self aware, and universally charitable manner. But instead, you make a big deal out of pointing out the mistakes of others to the complete and total detriment of being capable of recognizing your own shortcomings. That sentence is poorly written. It doesn't make sense. But what I'm saying is, like, he's really quick to point out when other people, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, he's really quick to point out when people make mistakes that are below a 5, but can't recognize that he's constantly making mistakes that are above a 5. Right. So it's like he's by far one of the most problematic people in the environment at most times, right? But and one of the things that makes him one of the most problematic people is that he's just constantly shitting on everybody else for for like just unremarkable stuff. You're so consumed with feeling powerful and cool for yanking the bags that you neglect that it makes you look dumb in light of the fact that a means of performing this task effortlessly and without the fuss has been built into the system, right? Without making a scene, right? He's just like, look what I can do. Oh my God, Stuart from fucking that scene. Look what I can do. Like that, that that's the stupidity. Oh my God. What's Mama saying? I'm yanking the bag. I had a friend in college that we would use that sketch to make fun of stuff like all the time. Like if you notice, like if your people are like something's going on, or even just like making fun of yourself, and you just be like, "Oh, look what I can do." Oh my goodness. This is why neighbors leave notes on your door. Take the advice, God damn it. Okay, so since we're here at that, I don't because I think this is mentioned elsewhere, but I'm not entirely sure to what capacity. So I had actually been kind of it's like I've been mentally asking for a sign from the universe. I'm like, do other people see this shit? Am I just overly sensitive to him, or are other people finding him equally like kind of irritating to be around or problematic, right? I'm trying to get away from using that word so much, but it is what it is. So anyway, um, so this one day we left to go to the store, and when we opened the door, there was a sticky note on the outside of the store. And when he grabbed it and looked at it and read it, and it was a note that just said, like, I pray that one day you learn how to be nicer to your neighbors or something, what like, and it was like, and then he kept it. It was like he stuck it somewhere on his desk for like the longest time. But I'm trying to like, I asked him like, why? What is that about? Like, why would somebody leave that note on your door? And because of course I'm curious of like what's the mark like where did this come from? And he told me some story about like that downstairs that day. It had something to do with somebody had like chopped up a bunch of onions and all the like onion skins and the end pieces and all of that stuff. They had it in like a plastic like grocery bag and they tied it shut, but then instead of like putting it in the dumpster or throwing it down the chute, they had just left it like inside the door. And I guess I don't know if or like when the garbage truck came and like maybe it fell out of the dump, like nobody did it on purpose or whatever, but I guess it was like starting to rot and smelling really bad. So I never really could quite parse the whole story. All I know is it had something to do with a grocery bag of onion skins and him getting really pissed off at some random lady for doing it or just leaving it down there like that. Like I don't like I said, like even his own story and recounting of events wasn't very coherent. But from what I could make of it, it was something pretty insignificant that he was completely blowing his top over. There was another incident where we were coming back from the store and there was a bunch of people downstairs by about, I mean, like 4 or 5 people. So like the normal community room crowd, and a lot of people in the building had dogs. You're allowed to have pets. A lot of people had small dogs. And there was this little dog that was kind of running around, and there was a guy that I didn't recognize too well, right? So it's like there's like 250 people that live in the building, and so it's just like I probably never even encountered everybody in the building, right? So anyway, um, but there was a guy that I'd seen regularly. His name was Joe, and Joe had a little dog, like a little Chihuahua Terrier mix kind of a thing. And this dog did kind of look like Joe's dog, but to me, right, like it's obviously not Joe's dog. The guy, I think, even like was standing there with the leash, or like you could tell just from like the read the room kind of environmental situation that the dog belonged to this guy that I didn't know. We'll just call him Rick, right? And so he started going off about like, hey, has anybody called Joe to tell him his dog is down here? And Ralph told him, he's like, that's not Joe's dog, that's Rick's dog. And he's like, but somebody needs to call Joe and tell him that his dog is down here. And he's like, it's Rick's dog. I mean, like Rick is standing right there, and why his dog, like, kind of like, what the hell is going on? And then, so Ralph is like yelling. He's like, it's Rick's dog. Rick is standing right there. It is his dog, the man standing by the dog. It's his dog. It's not Joe's dog. Well, someone should just call Joe and tell him to come down here and get his dog. So finally, Ralph screams at him, "Get a new fucking hearing aid." So I'm like, so those are my two. Like, I absolutely, there were other little ones, but here and there, but just in case, save some for later kind of a thing. That by the time this was all said and done, I was completely aware that everybody was fully on board with like, this dude is a fucking joke. Okay. So, anyway. You take it upon yourself to initiate fights and arguments when you perceive someone else as doing something wrong, even if it's something you are guilty of on a regular basis. The worst is when you get on people's case for coming into the building and not signing in when you have me in tow. You are obviously the biggest breaker of this rule, and yet it has absolutely no effect on how your entitled little ass treats other people. There are times, like now, that I sit back and evaluate our relationship and think that it wouldn't be too far off personality wise for me to be your mother and you to be either my 3-year-old or 13-year-old son. In either case, I would be telling you off and straightening up your negative, awkward behaviors real fucking quick. So, like I said, he treated me like I existed in some weird space between being a surrogate for his mother and being his pet. And then at the same time, he was like a 3-year-old going on 13. That it's like if I had any actual argumentative thrust in the situation, I would have just been telling him about himself 16 times a day. But because of the nature of the situation, it was like, nope, you gotta like kind of act like this guy is not that bad, but he's one of the most awful people you've ever encountered, like unimaginably awful people ever. I was like, I thought, what's his name? Farley, or it was like the Ebenezer Scrooge's, that it's like, can you imagine like that? Just it's your job and you get paid reasonably well, and it's a decent enough job, right? All things considered, that it's kind of worth putting up with, like, right? Pun intended, right? I'm literally just putting up with this man, living with him, but also just dealing with his shit, right? But yeah, I mean, any normal person can see that this guy just, he needed to be dealt with, right? And that was it. Here's another example of immature behavior that I think you believe somehow speaks highly of yourself to yourself. I usually have my headphones in during the day, either listening to something I'm watching or the music of Summoner's War so that I know when a run is over while farming. Anyway, the point is, I have my headphones in and there is sound flowing through them. Depending on what I'm watching, the volume is higher or lower at certain parts, or maybe I have it up higher than usual or whatever. Sometimes I can hear you and sometimes I can't. If I'm actually trying to concentrate, I wear them because they block out the noise from outside. So this building was really close to the freeway. So like if we had the windows open because we didn't have AC, so you have to have the windows open or it would get too hot. But then it was actually really loud because of all the traffic outside. Um, so that being said, one of the things I think you do is try to talk to me in a hushed voice just so that I can't hear you. That way you can feel that you have evidence that I am hard of hearing as well, thus making yourself feel better about actually being hard of hearing. Sometimes you come near me and flap your arms around like a hatchling. I don't know why you find it so hard to get my attention in a positive, non-irritating way. But like you could just walk over and kind of wave or like put your hand on the desk or like tap on the desk or whatever. Like he would come over like waving both of his hands and so, like that he needed to make a spectacle in order to get my attention, and it's like he's just a person that's constantly making a spectacle of himself. And so it's kind of it's the chicken, like speaking of eggs and chickens and hatchlings, right? It's a chicken or the egg problem, right? Because it's like I don't know if he's doing it just because he likes making a spectacle of himself, which is weird, or if it's because he thinks he has to make a spectacle of himself to get my attention, which is equally weird. Right, so like no matter how you slice it, the behavior itself is enough of an observation, and this is going to come into play like with as far as like the narcissistic personality disorder and the book that I ended up writing about this and my hypothesis about the underlying causes of narcissistic personality disorder, right, is that you don't have anything but behavior to go on, but a lot of personality disorders, especially narcissism, requires some understanding of the motivation behind the behavior in order to actually realize that it's disordered. Because he could just have the mistaken impression that And this is like mental note to self. I'll just throw this out. This is the great video for the grocery store checking out video from the deaf creator and the misunderstandings kind of situation, right? Where it's like, I guess in some possible world, someone's gotten him convinced that I'm like half blind and half deaf too, like that he actually believes that he has to be doing this stuff, and I just don't have access to whatever it is that's causing him to believe that, right? Which is kind of like this, I don't know if you necessarily call that the null hypothesis or whatever, but like I just don't know what else you would refer, like the just standing on innocence, was that the Hanlon's razor or whatever, that it's like don't ascribe to malice what stupidity will suffice for. So it's like I feel like if someone's been misinformed and they're basically quote unquote stupid about you, you can't really fault them for treating you the way they think you need to be treated because they genuinely don't know different, right? But after how long do you have to be around somebody before you start to realize that what you believed about them isn't true? I'm just all over the place with the screen today, huh? Okay. It's just me. I want you to go away, but you can't because I live in your home. Right. It's so that it's kind of like, in a lot of ways, it's like if these are petty things, right, to be bent out of shape over, or like to be bothered by. And a lot of it is just the underlying stress of not being able to speak up about things that are actually important. It starts to wear on you about every little thing, right? Every little thing starts to become bigger and bigger in light of the fact that things that are actually enormous can't be addressed. I found a show on Netflix called Magic for Humans while you were downstairs minding the community room and I was cleaning the living space. It was a really interesting magic show program that I knew you'd like, but it was only 6 episodes that were only about 20 minutes long. I knew you would say something disastrous for my quickly developing facepalm concussion syndrome. Surely enough, about halfway through the second episode, you say, "Do they have a series with this guy?" Seriously? Like, I couldn't help laughing. We're watching it right now. Silence. What a beautiful sound. Of course, it didn't stop there. Spoiler alert, kind of. There is a guest on the show that is a Lego certified master builder. During his introduction, the host does a brief interview in which this person says that they grew up building with Legos, went away to be a lawyer for a little while, then started building with Legos again, and the rest is history. A semi awkward line of joking around the phrase master builder ensues. At the end, you say, "Oh, he's an engineer." No, 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 no. He literally fucking said he was a lawyer. Your fantasy job, clearly, both by ear and by eye. And they're talking about the man being good at building Legos, not skyscrapers or bridges or amusement parks or trucking routes or space pens or any number of things that engineers actually do. Okay, so point about me and the space pens, because I went to Kansas State University and I started out, it was actually because my math teacher in high school, he'd gotten a letter from them as like recruiting or whatever. And he's like, "Here, you be good at this." And it's for industrial engineering. So when I was a freshman, I started out in the industrial engineering program. And there's a joke about the industrial engineering program at K-State because they're the ones who invented the ink pen that writes in space. And the joke is just Russians just use a pencil, right? This propensity for overcomplicating things and the irony of that being the department that's supposed to be efficient. So anyway, that's where space pens came from. I just found that that's just a fun little, yeah. Anywho, um, but yeah, so he's over here trying to figure out why they're talking about master builder. He can't put together the untaught, right? The masturbator, master builder, and then that master builder is just something that they say to people who are really, really good at Legos, right? He can't keep track of these. He's barely skimming the surface of the world around him. And it's not just, like I said, it's not just TV, and and based on his overall intelligence and all that, it seems like he's had this problem his whole life, right? So I don't know where that cut off because I did actually end up letting it go to sleep. But anywho, that he can't figure out that he can't he's only ever just scratching the surface, right? So like the nuances of things are completely lost on him, and the jokes and the deeper meanings, double entendre, sarcasm, wit, and all that stuff. He can't um he can't track it. And I don't think that it's just a relic of his like current state of affairs as an older person who's like half deaf and has glaucoma, and it's not actually the result of that. I don't necessarily even believe that a lot of that stuff was really true because he seemed to be perfectly well capable of seeing and reading and hearing stuff and whatever that I think he was using a lot of the possibilities. Like, it's like, hey, now that I'm getting older, I can just pretend that I'm deaf, and that's why I'm actually a little slower than everybody else. But there's something to be said for being intelligent enough to figure out to do things to compensate for your lack of intelligence. That's part of why I feel like the little conspiracy theory thing, it's like mild evidence in favor of that because I don't see how it would be possible for somebody who isn't that bright and seems to think that they are, then actually also somehow having the happenstance of being able to come up with the idea that they need to compensate for themselves. You know what it reminds me of is like when they say like with psychopaths, like people with antisocial personality disorder, that um, they kind of start to figure out that they're different and they learn that they're going to have to figure out how to cope with the fact that they don't have a lot of these emotions and feelings by just paying attention to what other people do when they react to things. So like they learn that when somebody says that like their grandparent died, that they are supposed to feel sorry for them and say like, "Oh, I'm sorry for your loss," and like act like you're also hurt when they're really on the inside just like, "I don't give a fuck. Why are you telling me this?" Right. And so over time, but the thing is, they've actually, though, also have the intellect to realize that in the past, when their reaction has been, why do you think I care? Right. That people have told them, dude, like, that's fucking rude. Right. They've been able to learn about themselves in order to do that. So he would have to, in order to learn that, okay, I'm going to need to figure out how to compensate, he would have to have been getting feedback in his earlier life. And instead of just like, growing the fuck up and changing the bad behaviors, he just decided that he wanted to compensate for them instead and continue doing them. So, yeah. I guess like this is an odd metaphor for this, but it would be kind of like if someone was an alcoholic who just couldn't stop drinking and driving, decided to try to engineer a driverless car so that they just didn't have to drive, but they could still get themselves to and from the bar. Why not just try to work on your drinking problem? Right? I mean, it's like driverless cars is a nice idea, but why not just try to work on your, oh, you know what else you like the whole artificial womb thing when it's like women need to have more babies and blah 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 blah. Let's develop artificial wombs. It's like, or we could just focus on why so many men are such assholes and why it's so expensive to raise children and why nobody has any fucking money. Like maybe we could actually address why people aren't having children instead of trying to figure out how to just manufacture children. Um, I mean, but it's like because we all know why they actually want all of these extra children. I mean, which is another reason to just not be having biological children. I'm not trying to like birth people into the indentured servitude of American capitalism. Good Lord. Anyway, you get my point. Anyway, now that I think about it, maybe he doesn't understand that licenses, certificates, and degrees are actually necessary in order to practice these things. You can't just be able to research stuff and put an argument together. Boom, you're a lawyer. Literally, almost anyone can do that to a certain extent. One needs to be particularly educated, tested, and certified or licensed to to be welcome in the club. This is also one of the reasons that I don't believe him when he says he schmoozes outside the courthouse with the lawyers. At any rate, if he is telling the truth about this, then he must believe that they welcome him to the club when that's not likely the case. Usually, he also mentions that they were talking about how cold it is inside the courthouse or something equally mundane that isn't likely to be the preferred topic for a bunch of lawyers on a smoke break. Right? Like water cooler talk at high level jobs or whatever, you're not talking about the weather or the overall climate outside or like how fast grass grows. Like I even remember working at a call center. We did the tech support for the DSLK. I know I mentioned that too because and this came in handy with living with him too and stuff. But anyway, Like when we would all go on breaks together and go outside for our smoke break, we would talk about our weirdest calls. Because I remember one time, um, one of the members of my friend group, he got out there about 5 minutes late. So at one point, they divided us into two different teams. One only ever did installation help, and the other team did straight up tech support. And I was on the straight up tech support team, and most of my friends ended up on the installations team. And so, anyway, but we had one of my friends had made a bulletin board messaging board. This was kind of like before, this was pre Facebook. This was like 2001, 2002, or something like that, whatever. And so anyway, so we had our own message board at the call center for our little group of friends and stuff. And so, because I mean, in our little troop, there was like 15, 20, 25 of us, and we just didn't always work every shift together or like even ever, blah, 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 right? So, anywho, so in any given shift, there was only like 6 or 7 of us actually working at the call center. So we would be able to take our breaks together. And so we would all go out, we would smoke or eat our lunch, do what we were doing. So one day, um, Travis comes out, like he's a little bit late. And he's like, yeah, he's like, I was on that call for a while because he's like, you're never going to believe who called in for help installing their DSL. And we're like, yeah, right. We're never going to guess because like, he's like, no. He's like, I shit you not. And he's like, and just so that I can prove it, right? Because it's like pics or it didn't happen, receipts. I wrote down his customer number so you can look it up and see for yourself, right? So sorry to Fred Durst if this story is or isn't true. But yeah, so allegedly he had called for help installing and because and like multiple router systems. So some people were buying systems that were actually kind of deeper installation, right? I've got 5 computers in this different rooms of my mansion, and I need all these like Wi-Fi boosters and blah 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 and whatnot. And so, anywho, yeah. So that was fun. Anyway, that was just kind of an anecdotal thing. But like I said, that it's like even when working in a tech support call center, we weren't going on our smoke breaks talking about, oh my God, I wish they would turn the heat up in there. It's so fucking cold. Oh man, I wish they would restock the vending machines. Funny thing about the vending machines in there too, they uh they took Sacagawea dollars. You remember those big like dollar coins? And it was the only place like I don't know, but it was just so funny because we would all like there was a change machine and it's like you would have to come in to the vending machine. It took regular change too, right? It gave you to receive change, but it didn't take dollar bills. It only took the Sacagawea dollar coins. And so then they had a thing in there so that you could change your bills into coins. So we all we all had these dollar coins. Okay, sorry, nostalgia got the better of me there, and I let the screen recording go off again. But anyway, I'm pretty sure I was just like laughing about the dollar coins. Okay, anyway, all that being said, um, even when we came out on our breaks, we were either talking about calls that we had had, like weird customer stuff, or whatever. Like sometimes people would have actually like really bizarre issues, and we talk like that. This is how I managed to fix it, or one thing or the other. And then at some point, they started making us do these troubleshooting flowcharts, and the flowcharts were so ridiculous because people would call up with a particular problem, and you would be like, "I know exactly how to fix it." It's the ninth step on the fucking flow chart. And you would have to go through the flow chart because if QA was listening to your call and you did it, you could get fired. So you would have to do all of this unnecessary troubleshooting with people in order. So just putting that out there too, if anybody's listening to this and you've ever been frustrated with how long you've been on hold for customer service and like this, that, and the other, it's because these companies literally come up with stupid fucking policies and shit because the people in charge don't know the job that you're doing or how to actually do this shit. And then they also think that the people who are just working in the call center or whatever are fucking idiots. And so what they do is they dumb the work down to a point that they make it take so unnecessarily long to do everything that the customer, like you're just as frustrated as the customer is. Right? Like, I'm not trying to sit here and tell you that you need to turn your computer off and reboot it because you already told me that and now I'm so far removed, it's like, what, 20 years ago. But it's like, you already told me that you're on a 1998 compact running Windows 98 and it's going to take 10 fucking minutes for your computer to boot up. right? Like I already know I don't want to do this step. This is making me cringe. This is making my pussy tight. Like I don't, ugh, right? And you don't want to do it, but you have to because the company says that you have to do everything by the flow chart. So here you are, wasting 10 minutes on the phone while a whole bunch of people are on hold, waiting for this guy's computer to boot up. All right. Likewise, no one with a realistic social intelligence would tell someone off in a public place. That's a high school bullshit click game. But they certainly aren't inviting him to happy hour at the bar for pizza and beer when the day is done. He is not, for all intents and purposes, a genuine member of their social group. He's the kind of person that you understand has to be dealt with at the family barbecue or the office Christmas party, but he's not going to be invited to the pickup baseball game after the potluck or the after hours dive bar once Secret Santa gifts are passed out, right? That it's like that in a certain, it's like, okay, yeah, we have to deal with Greg, but Greg can't sit with us, you know? I mean, so yeah, but I don't think any of that ever actually really happened either, but I don't know. I don't know. Here's what qualifies me as a social support companion. He needs someone to project his disabilities on in order to maintain a healthy level of self esteem because he's a narcissist. He seems stuck in an infantile stage of psychological development as well. I wonder if he dropped out of high school early, like freshman year. There are certain trivial things he doesn't know that are common knowledge if he paid attention in school. For instance, I once had a sinus attack that left me so congested that I couldn't taste anything. This is funny because I know I've mentioned this before. Um, when I told him this, he asked me what was wrong with my taste buds. I distinctly remember learning about taste buds in at most high school, if not elementary. He was also quite taken aback when he came down with bronchitis last winter. He went on and made such a fuss you'd have thought he had pneumonia or mononucleosis. The fact that bronchitis is rather common seemed totally lost on him. He acted like he had come down with the chicken pox at his age, like having this illness was such an anomaly that people should be amazed. Like he was wearing a mask and something like we'd go grocery shopping and he'd have the mask on and he would just offer this information to people. Like he like the cashier, he'd just be like, I'm wearing the mask because I have bronchitis right now. And it was just like, dude, like what fucking running around? It's like, why are you over here then? Right? And it was like, I'm pretty sure like Lila could have just done the shopping, right? It's like you don't need to be running around with your bronchitis, but whatever. Instead, people weren't impressed. The fact that no one gave a shit didn't have the appropriate effect on his social self-awareness. In general, I believe that he comes to think that people are uncaring assholes instead of realizing that he isn't anything to shout about, or just that they don't understand him. They don't realize what a big deal it is to have bronchitis. Like, I don't know, they understand exactly how much not a big deal it is, but okay, go off, sis. All right. Over time, people come to stop caring about anything he says, like a bizarre combination of Chicken Little and The Boy Who Cried Wolf. Last night we had hot dogs. When you came back up from the community room, I made my plate. I left the pot on low on the stove so that your dogs would stay warm. I noticed while I was eating that you hadn't turned the fire off, but I didn't do anything about it because the steamy water makes a nice humidifier, and, well, it just isn't that big of a deal. After dinner, you got up to do the dishes, and then I hear, oh, you forgot to turn the stove off. Don't worry, I turned it off. I ignored you because, first of all, you served yourself last. I had left the stove on purpose so that your food didn't get cold. More importantly, this is the sort of thing that well developed social creatures just do without saying anything. This is not the first time you have mentioned something so petty. It reminded me of all the times you have said something to me about emptying the water out of your soap dish so it doesn't get soggy. You shower last. You are the one that doesn't empty your soap dish. This type of self awareness is part of normal human development, and you seem to not have it. I know, I'm pretty sure I've told the soggy soap story before too, so I'm not going to tell it again. Um, but yeah, this the stove off with the hot dogs still kind of simmering. That it's like when you got your hot dogs out of the water, you didn't notice that it was still kind of like low boiling, right? Or like why, you know, I don't know. It's just odd. This wasn't the only time that this happened. And like I said, it's not that I'm infallible or don't make mistakes, but it's just that every time and any time anything would go some kind of a way, he would have to make this spectacle of himself. And it was like, there are some things you could just do that it's like, oh, it's only because like something, if you have it on high to boil and then you turn the knob down and low is right next to off. And if you don't quite turn it until it clicks, like, do like simple thing like, oh, you forgot to turn the stove off. Don't worry, I did it for you. Like, well, I would hope so, you fucking asshole. I would hope that you wouldn't notice that all you had to do was turn it one more click, and instead of turning around to me and being like, yo, bitch, get up and get over here and turn the stove off, that you would just turn it off, right? And it's like, I'm not worried about it. I like left it on purpose so that your hot dogs didn't get cold. Because sometimes, like, if he was, this was at a point too, like, I had mentioned the watching TV at night, and at one point I'd finally like I'd had enough, and I said, I'm like, I actually don't like doing this. I don't want to end my day of doing things at 6 o'clock when I go take a shower and then make dinner and then basically have to like turn in for the night and like eat and then basically go to bed and like sit in my bed and just do whatever. Like I'd rather still be able to like be at my desk like doing things all night. Like we don't need to eat and watch movies together, do we? And he agreed. I was like, thank God. So it turned into like I would go take a shower, I'd make dinner, and we would both just like stay at our respective doing whatever we were doing all night long. So sometimes when I would make dinner like this, it's like because boiling hot dogs doesn't take long, right, either. So it's like by the time I get out of the shower and I throw on the hot dogs and whatever, when they're done, I made my plate. When he came out of the shower, he made his plate. But I don't know how long sometimes he's in there for 40 minutes to an hour. So I just left it on low. Right. So it's like I don't understand why it's that big of a deal. So I left it on to keep your hot dogs warm. Like why in a situation like that would you see that and not think, oh, she left it on for my hot dogs? Right? But then to have major play, we both eat. You, because it was like I cooked, he did the dishes. That was like the only most cooperative thing in the entire fucking environment, right? So he would come by, collect my plate, go to wash the dishes, notice that the stove was still on, and then he would turn it off. So like to turn to me and be like, "Oh, you left the stove on." Like, "Oh, don't worry, I turned it off." No, you left the stove on. You turn it off, right? Same thing. I always feel like too, sometimes these things are like the toilet seat debate, that it's like should like put this toilet seat down or like leave the toilet seat up, but it's like if he has to put it up to pee, like if you have to put it down to pee, then everybody is just moving the toilet seat. Why is it men's responsibility to ensure that the toilet seat is positioned for women to use it? Because they could just as easily fire back and be like, bitch, put the seat up when you're done. But they've never done that. They just sit here being like, shit, my bad. And it's like, but for all the things in life, period, ever, that's the one thing about men and women that I've never understood is why men have never gotten actually completely bent the fuck out of shape over the toilet seat debate. Just make sure that you can sit on the toilet when you need to. I don't know why it's that big of a deal. And I could hear people shrieking, but it's like because we all sit down to shit. Who cares? Just make sure the toilet seat is down before you sit on it. Take responsibility for your own life. Shit. All right, on that note, because this has gone on long enough, I'm going to go ahead and call it quits for this one, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.